Today is Friday, October 25th in 2024, and we welcome you all to our Chapter 49 podcast. My name is Larry Lannan. I'm a volunteer and a retiree here, and we'll help Chapter 49 out with various issues such as communication. So we welcome you to our podcast. Glad you could join us. NTEU Chapter 49 represents most IRS employees in the state of Indiana. And allow me to welcome back Duncan Giles, our chapter president.
Thanks, Larry. It's always good to be here.
And if you're looking on video, you can see we have a return visitor. We're always thrilled to have her with us. Doreen Greenwald, the president, national president for NTEU. So Doreen Greenwald, welcome once again to our podcast.
Thank you, Larry and Duncan. It's always great to join you two gentlemen on a Friday.
Well, the first thing I'd like to do is ask about your recent visit to Indianapolis. You had a large gathering of NTEU chapters from all different parts of the government, all agencies represented by NTEU. So just tell us about your visit to Indianapolis.
Well, our visit was, in my opinion, outstanding. It was something that we have tried. It was a fall training that we conducted for all of our chapters. And as you know, federal employees have a lot more in common than they do separate. And NTEU represents now 36 agencies. Back in September, it was 35. We just added FTC to our count, which we're really proud to have them join us. But it was open to all chapters from all agencies. And we focused our efforts on things that are broad in spectrum, like reasonable accommodation issues and how to best approach negotiations. It was a very well-attended training. People loved being in Indianapolis. Everybody had a great time, and it was really about solidarity and coming together and strengthening our union. And I think everybody, from the responses I received from everybody, was well received and something we're going to look at doing again in the future. So my hat's off to Indianapolis for hosting. And Duncan showed us the town. It was really, we had a great night, and it was a great time by everyone. And so looking forward to doing future events like that. But you guys kicked off our inaugural event well, and you well represented. So thank you.
Everything Duncan said about Indianapolis. So that's all I can say. That's a joke, folks. I want to start off, Doreen, by asking you about something coming up. Of course, we're recording this on October 25th. We're inching closer to the election day. There's a national election of importance to NTEU. Also, there are many Senate and House races, and I like to write about local races where I live, but voting is a very important civic act. And I know NTEU has worked with, there have been changes in the law favorable to voting, and NTEU has also dovetailed on that with other agencies, and just ensuring that people have the ability to vote either early or in person. Talk a little bit about the importance of voting and how NTEU has worked to make it easier for those that are in our bargaining unit.
So as federal employees know, everything about their jobs, their careers, their benefits are all determined by Congress, the House, the Senate, the White House. And so voting needs to be important, not only as a civic event for just the citizens across our country, but especially for federal employees. And so what I say to federal employees is you always want to be knowledgeable about the information out there, look at the facts, and make good decisions based on your needs and your family's needs. So when I say that, I say have a plan to vote. And so why is this important? Well, first of all, there's an executive order out there, and we have a memorandum of understanding based on that executive order that makes it easier for employees to vote. So they should be contacting their manager and working with them to develop a plan. And what that plan does is give employees up to 4 hours of administrative leave to go vote for each election. And so I've heard some feedback over the wire over the last couple of days where some managers seem to be misinformed about the executive order. They're following Article 36 of our contract, which has been supplemented by the Memorandum of Understanding and the executive order. And so as of this morning, I have reached out to both the Chief Human Capital Officer, as well as had conversations with Taxpayer Services, because that seems to be where some of our issues are coming from, so that they can reiterate the language that they had put out earlier in August, reminding managers of this. And so again, employees get up to 4 hours. Now, we need to be clear with that. That's up to 4 hours. So if employees are just asking for a blanket 4 hours, they may not get all 4 hours. But understand, we should not have managers out there Googling maps and trying to figure out the exact time it takes for somebody to drive to and from a voting center, to make sure they don't get a minute more of administrative leave, because there's no way a manager is going to know. Right now we're seeing record voter turnout. So how do you anticipate the lines that people will face, or what has happened? And so we're trying to get that word out. And that's why I'm encouraging people to have a plan to vote, have an early conversation with your manager. So in case they're one of those managers who may not be up to date, that we have some time to correct that so they get the right information and they don't run into any obstacles when they go to vote.
Doreen, Duncan and I both came out of many years of working in the toll-free operation, taxpayer services, if you will. And I do remember one year when our chapter president was pushing some people who were in the telephone operation and not anxious. This was a long time ago. We didn't even have the language we have now, was for turning people down for voting requests. And he threatened to have a news conference in front of the call center on election day if she didn't start following the law and the contracts. And it's amazing how quickly they change their minds. But yes, very good tips from Doreen. And we do at NTEU, we have an executive order and also a memorandum of understanding to take care of that. If you ask for time to vote and you feel you've been denied unfairly, let your NTEU chapter know locally. And I'll give the next question to Duncan Giles.
Yeah.
Duncan, before we go on to that, I just want to remind people, as part of that executive order, there's also up to 4 hours to volunteer as an unpaid, nonpartisan poll worker. So if people are interested in doing that as well, that is also another option out to them. And I just wanted to let people know that as well. So I apologize. Take it away, Duncan.
No, that's exactly what I was going to hit is A, the importance of voting, and B, that you can do it. You have time to work as a poll worker, where before it was just strictly, you had to take your own leave and then do that. So I think it's great that you're able to do that. I've worked the polls many times, and it can be tough work, but it's very rewarding, and it's a job that needs to be done. So if folks are interested in that, please reach out to your local election officials, because I guarantee you they need the help. The next topic that we have is something that has been going on for several months. And to me, it's one of those things, great in theory, but the rollout has been like a train wreck, to put it mildly. And that's talking about remote sites doing paperwork, and specifically right now, starting on 1040X and the training or lack thereof that the remote sites have gotten. And I know you've gotten some information on this, so I'm sure folks would love to hear about this.
So you're absolutely right, Duncan. When this first started, we were back in the pandemic, and the focus was on level of service on the phones, and a lot of the paperwork built up because they had to pull resources onto the phones. And so to address that level of paperwork, they had rolled out a program to introduce paper to some of the remote call sites. And we heard some voices from other call sites that said, hey, we would love the opportunity to get off the phones periodically. We'd like the learning experience. We like the variety, and overtime came with some of that work, and people wanted that opportunity as well. So hearing that from our members, NTEU contacted the agency and said, why are you limiting it to only a few remote call sites? Is there an opportunity to allow people at all the call sites to do some of this work, to volunteer to do that work? So, of course, IRS, unfortunately, I like to say they hear every third word. They missed the word volunteer, and they rolled it out across they mandated it for all of the remote call sites. And they introduced training to all the call sites. And so they have the right to do that. Let me be clear. To train everybody on the remote and the paperwork. And this was brand new to the remote sites. They had not done that before. And so what we heard from folks was the training that was provided was not adequate training. People felt uncomfortable with the level of training they got. They felt like they were set up for failure because they weren't confident in the work they were doing. They didn't have people they could reach out and ask questions Two, they felt like they would be making errors. And we heard from people in the campuses that routinely do this work that they were being then assigned cases that were done incorrectly, and it was actually adding more work instead of addressing it. So we went back to the agency and said, look, you need to retrain folks. This is not going as you anticipated. And to the IRS's credit, Taxpayer Services credit, they said, we're going to do training. Well, they rolled out what they called reinforcement training. And I just finished visiting a couple of different call sites, both in St. Louis and Kansas City and some other areas that were talking about the 1040X problems. What they said to me is, Doreen, what this reinforcement training is self-study. And what we were told, and I talked to some of the people that were identified as SMEs. Now get this, the SMEs were tapped on a Monday, never had done 1040X work themselves. They were given 12 hours of training on the IRM alone and told they can only answer questions for employees on the IRM, not on how to actually work the cases. So the employee said to me, can you believe I have no understanding about how they trained me? I'm now supposed to teach myself how to do this. And the people I'm supposed to go to for questions can only answer IRM questions. So obviously the frustration has grown. It has not decreased. So after visiting a couple of different call sites, I went back to Taxpayer Services and I said, look, everybody's supposed to start being evaluated on this work starting November 1. I'm asking you to reconsider that because people do not have the comfort level. And this should be about making sure employees have the tools they need to be successful and not a gotcha system. Second of all, we need more training from people who have actually done the work. So if that's campus employees or whoever, you need to have them available to help answer questions, actually allow SMEs to watch them do the work so that they are in a place that they can actually answer true questions. Next, I heard is they need mentors to assist them. So when they run into problems, can they reach out to somebody who's actually doing the work and that can help them resolve that? I also heard from people that said, not only do we not get time, let's say we have a day assigned to do paper. If the level of service is dropping, they're getting pulled back. And so this constant stop and pull back to the phones is making it very difficult for people to learn and really grasp what they're doing. So they're getting interrupted a lot. And I heard from people, I love being on the phones. I don't really want to do this paperwork. Could we please opt out? And so these are all the things that I have raised to Taxpayer Services. Their initial response to my request was disappointing, I will say. They explained to me that they did all this training in March. They explained they were doing this reinforcement training. These are the things I had written to them that were not working. So apparently my communication with them did not hit the mark. They wanted to know which areas of the country were having these issues, to which I responded, everybody.
All of it.
And so they have agreed to take another look at it. And so I'm still waiting on a response on that. So I at least want people who are hearing this podcast to know NTEU feels your pain. This was something that we thought was a positive option for employees. It has not rolled out that way. We are working very hard to try and get IRS to do something different in response to this. We don't want them in harm's way. If they go forward with evaluating people after November 1, please communicate with your local stewards. We can always raise a lack of training as an issue should they try to damage your performance appraisal. And we are fighting this at the national level as well as locally, and we're going to keep pushing back. So I just wanted people to know we hear them loud and clear. And I also want to thank them because the IRS has hit awesome targets with level of service. They are delivering they delivered a great season last year. We're going to get ready to go into a new season. This is new work for them. And we hear them loud and clear, and we know they want to do a good job. And so we're going to do everything we can to support them.
Yeah, that's one of the things, just to piggyback on some of the things you're saying. I've got a meeting this afternoon with folks, national IRS folks, about this from concerns that you had raised. And it's something that we have been talking to them about since the inception. It's one of those great concepts and poor rollout. And that's what we tell folks. If you get hit with this negative recordation, especially come November 1st, lack of training is absolutely a defense. Make notes, because people are getting things back and saying, well, I'm basically, I've been certified and I got lucky. I got easy cases, or, I'm getting 5 more cases and I don't know what I'm doing and they don't know anywhere. So it's great for them to hear, not just from somebody me locally who's battling it, but from you to let them know what the overall picture is, and that we're pitching in and trying to hit back as hard as we can. And I will be reinforcing your apparently them not listening to as hard as I can to the highest levels of W&I and Taxpayer Services on this, to reinforce that they've got to basically start over. I wish it could be better, but they need to start over with this to basically get the folks trained so they can do that. And having AHOD, all hands on deck, for those of you who aren't in Taxpayer Services, you're supposed to work paper. I've got all hands on deck. Okay, it's tough for me to remember what I was doing because, now I've got to jump back on the phone. So it's great to hear what National is doing, as well as the local chapters all over the country, because I know I'm not the only one. I know that there are a lot of my brethren across the country who are pushing back on this. So, folks, we are trying.
And you made an excellent point, Duncan, because I've heard from people that are certified. So certified means you're like trained and ready to go. And the people are like, they rushed my certification through. I know I'm certified, but I don't feel confident in the work I'm doing. And when they reach out to the SMEs came to me and said, people want to know the actual steps to work a case. I wasn't trained in that. I know the IRM, but that's not necessarily where the questions are coming from. The managers, they are talking to me one-on-one and saying, this is a mess. They confirm. They feel bad for the SMEs because the SMEs are taking the heat from the employees, and they know that this has just not been rolled out properly. This is not a situation where these are employees just not wanting to do the work. This has been a bad rollout, and the IRS has to fix this culture of trying to rush to get a gotcha system in place instead of listening to the feedback of the employees and giving them the tools they need to be successful. Because ultimately this impacts taxpayer services. And we want that work done correctly and done right the first time. And so, we are trying our darndest to get them to listen and to provide the tools necessary and reevaluate, to date what has happened and take a different approach.
Well, all I can say is, after having spent 28 years as both at the IRS, part of the time as a union official, part of the time as a manager, it amazes me how some things remain the same and some things change. And what has remained the same is this issue has come up my whole 28 years that I was with IRS. So I'm very happy, and thank you for the update. I know the members and others who will listen or watch this podcast are very interested in this subject. Let me move on to another issue. This has to do with the people who are working inventories at the IRS. Taxpayer advocate, revenue officer, tax compliance officers, revenue agents go all down. They all have inventories of work they are to do. Now, the law does say very clearly that the management has the right to assign work. Nobody argues with that. But then when we get into a situation where it's impossible as a human being to even meet the inventory levels that are passed out to you, I think that's been a point of discussion between NTEU and management. I know you've had some success, some not very successful, in at least dialoguing with IRS about that. So you've had some successes. Talk about that and where you're working to just make sure that people have reasonable levels of inventory to work.
Yeah, it's been a constant struggle. I mean, for at least a decade now, we have been trying to push back at Taxpayer Advocate Service. Some of the problems at Taxpayer Advocate are self-induced by the advocate themselves because they set the criteria in which cases are accepted into the system. And as the Taxpayer Advocate, there is no what we used to call a queue, where we have that in collections, which means that cases can sit, kind of like in a filing cabinet, a technical filing cabinet, waiting to be worked, because the time frames are such that you have to contact people within so many hours of their case being received. And so all of the cases must be worked immediately, which puts a huge amount of stress on our case advocates. And so we've seen case advocates carrying inventory anywhere from 150 cases per case advocate, well above 200. And with all of the deadlines in each of those cases, that brings a huge amount of stress to employees. The problem with that, and the rub with that is as a union, we can't go into management and say, we think these case advocates should only have 30 cases or 40 cases. We have told them what we believe is a reasonable number, and it is closer to anywhere between 40 and 60 cases, not 200. And each of those cases depends on the technical aspects of it. How in depth is it? How many issues are involved in that case? And so the agency, for the most part, has said, thanks, but no thanks. This is a priority program, and we take care of our people, and there's nothing here to see. We know that's not true. And so we have every which way to Sunday tried to come at this issue, to talk about deadlines, to talk about priorities, to talk about the impact it has once the advocates are assigned work, because the law allows the agency, they can assign 1,000 cases to every case advocate. There's nothing we can do about that. What we as a union can do is talk about some of the fallout of that. So if you assign 1,000 cases, agency, you must prioritize them. Agency, you must say what can and cannot go away. Agency, you can determine what timeframes are ignored, or whether you're going to pursue discipline, or whether you're going to negatively record them, or what kind of things that are going to be in place to help case advocates. And so we've had ongoing dialogue with them, and I'm not kidding you, for at least 10 years, and trying to push back. Only recently have we seen some movement in Taxpayer Advocate, where I think they're starting to hear from employees. We've said for a long time that attrition has been a problem in the Taxpayer Advocate. People are getting burned out. They're retiring as soon as they can. We've heard from other pods that people don't want to apply for those jobs. Years ago, they wanted to go there because there were additional grades. We've worked with the Taxpayer Advocate to upgrade some of the positions in Taxpayer Advocate. But people are like, I don't want to go there because the stress level is so high. And let's face it, federal employees want to be successful. They care about the taxpayers they're working with. They are up all night stressing out because they aren't delivering for employees. So this is a huge issue for employees. And so we recently were able to reach an MOU in Taxpayer Advocate. I'm optimistic that I hope this will provide some relief to employees. I'm not naive that the bottom line here is the amount of cases that are assigned to employees. So we're going to monitor this. We also know the Taxpayer Advocate is working on a new computer program called Phoenix that's supposed to be able to help them better manage incoming inventories, so that people don't have such great discrepancies where we have people with 200 versus 100 cases, etc. But we'll have to see how that rollout is, because I've heard this story before and it didn't develop that way. And so, we are actively engaged in those projects and trying to persuade a Taxpayer Advocate as best we can. We are also going to continue to have dialogue with them and monitor this recent memorandum of understanding to see the outcomes that it is having, and weighing in to let them know if we're seeing problems along the way. Another point is we just did a recent survey on inventory with revenue officers. Now, revenue officers have a queue, and some of the feedback we've heard are from new revenue officers. The queue right now, there are guidelines out there for management to assign cases. Years ago, based on a lot of feedback from NTEU, a old executive, I don't know if old is right, or prior executive, Bobby Hunt, did implement a recommendation that revenue officers be held around the 85% of the overall inventory. And that's where revenue officers have been held for quite a while now. We're hearing from new hires that amount, that 85% is they're struggling with. Some of that has to do with the level of training they got when they were first brought on. They've shortened some of the training timeframes. People are being asked to do more earlier on in their career than when they've had a chance to kind of experience things. And so we're pushing back on the training level as well. And we're identifying for the agency that we believe people are working on their own time, which is not allowed by law. They should be paying overtime if people are required to do work to make sure that they're getting it done in the time that the work's assigned. And so the results of our poll showed that a lot of people are doing volunteer work, which is not allowed. And so we have a upcoming SBSC Business Improvement Committee meeting that we're going to be raising some of these issues and talk about inventories again. So it's on our minds, and I don't want revenue agents to feel like we're not paying attention to them. They don't necessarily have a queue, but I've heard from people that some of the training has been difficult. We were successful in raising at the prior SBSE BIC about the training, and people were able to raise their hands and ask for additional training or revisit some of the training that they felt uncomfortable with. And to SBSE's credit, they've allowed some of that training to happen. So we're going to continue to monitor it. And again, I want people to understand, it's not that NTEU agrees with the level of inventory that's out there. We are as equally frustrated with it as you are. We had hoped through all the additional hires that are coming on board that some of this training would balance out. And I think it will over time. But people have to feel comfortable in the training. They have to be successful in the training. And if they're not comfortable, they're leaving. And so we're very concerned about attrition levels as well. And we use that with the agency to say, you have to fix this because it costs you time and money to get people up and running. And we know these jobs take anywhere from 3 to 5 years to be really comfortable in doing the work that's being asked of them. And so if you catch people within the first 2 years and they don't feel confident in the training and feel like they're being set up for failure, they will look for other jobs either within the service or worse, walk out the door. And that will make it difficult for the IRS to continue to hire and to fight for additional funding, which will be necessary going forward. And so as a union, we try to attack this in many different ways, but we cannot get at the ultimate number. And so I just want people to understand that we're fighting this from every aspect, but we can't address that specific number. And that's why you won't ever see us saying, hey, it needs to be 50 cases.
Well, that's an excellent explanation. Thank you for that. And I will also say that in my view, you've done the right thing here by pointing out to the agency it's in their interest to fix this. So Duncan, I'll give you the next question.
Yeah, before I jump into the next question, I just want to reemphasize the points that Doreen has just made because they're all great. And that's the thing. We try and tell them they have too many cases, but we can't legally make them change it. And I've had that discussion with folks in TAS, folks in collection, folks in exam. So, we're working at it at every angle. And thank you, Doreen, for that excellent explanation on pointing that out. One of the things that I wanted to raise in this podcast, when we had the meeting with all the different chapters in Indianapolis, Mark Gray and his staff, he's our director of operations, very, very knowledgeable young man. I was going to say young man, but I don't know if I want to be that nice to Mark.
Mark will send you a check too.
Exactly. But some of the things we're talking about, the United benefits things that we'll be discussing in a later podcast that I alluded to, that I think is going to be very exciting during our open season for health, in addition to the consumer checkbook. Some other things that we can do possibly for members. The one thing that I really liked is we're redesigning the website, and you've recently sent something out to the members saying, hey, we want your suggestions. Like when I was hearing the presentation about the website, one of the first things that I did was went up to one of the folks who's working on redesigning it. And I'm like going, please, Lord, can you make the benefits easier to find? And she's looking at me and going, you're not the first person that's raised that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. because NTU offers a great deal of benefits to our members as an additional value for the dues that they're paying, aside from representation, negotiations, lobbying for higher pay, things of that nature. But if they can't find it immediately or don't see it, it's not worth it. So can you talk a little bit about the website redesign?
Sure, absolutely. So this was something I talked about when I campaigned as to run for national president, as well as having conversations with all our leaders throughout our national training conferences, both in spring and in fall. And what I heard from people is that, I mean, I recall when the website first launched. I go back a little bit. And it was, it was state of the art at the time. But as you know, with technology, every day it becomes older and we need to update things. And we've not, as a union, done a great job updating that website. And so I think we are in a different world today than we were when we first launched that, both in technology and where people are. Everybody's on their phones. Everybody wants different access to things. And so this is really our chance to make the website a premier website that really helps members find the information they need, our leaders find the information they need, and helps us recruit new members to understand what NTEU is all about so that they want to join us and be part of it. And so as you said, Duncan, we have a contractor that we're working with that is helping us, guide us. And so we met in Indianapolis in our fall training and kind of got some feedback from the leaders that were there. Now we have launched a survey for both members and leaders to answer some general questions. So I really urge your members who are watching this podcast to take the time. It's not overly burdensome. I know people are inundated with surveys, but it means a lot to me because I want our website. I want somebody to pull it up and say, wow, that's what I wanted. And I had a say in that. Because as a union, we care about what our members think and say. What drives us is what they want to see happen. And so this is really important to me. This is not just a check the box, I need to do a survey. I really care about what people think, and we all do. And so we want to make sure that their voices are heard and we're delivering on that. And I want, then we can take that and keep building off of it. So I'm excited about the launch of the website. It's going to take us about a year, I'm hoping. But the big part of the time that I've asked this contractor to work with us is I want to hear from our members and our leaders so that we are developing what they want to see and giving them the tools they need.
Yeah, Doreen, the last question has to do with the combined federal campaign. I know that that's an annual ritual within many government agencies, not just the IRS, but many of them. I've been involved with it in the past. Talk about NTEU's support of the CFC program.
So as a 35-year federal employee myself, I've had some experience with the CFC. I did campaigning early on in my career for it, volunteered to do that. So what the Combined Federal Campaign is a list of various, I'm losing my words here, various things that you can donate to that are charities and aid charities. That's the word I was looking for. Charities where people can donate to things of importance to them, things that they want to support. I would donate to things like maybe a food bank in my area, or I cared about women's shelters, or, there's a whole booklet of things, and you can look at, what things that are important to you. I believe in federal employees giving back to the community. I think we are heavily based in our communities, and I think it's important. I saw so much support for federal employees when we had the 35-day shutdown. And to me, it's important that we give back, as well as when people have our backs, we have to have their backs. And so I support the IRS, I support the CFC in rolling this out so that federal employees have a place that they can contribute. This is so we don't get inundated with commercials every day and people fighting for our dollars, but that you can have a say in what you donate to, that you can look at the book and see, I obviously recommend funds that the majority of the money goes to the actual fund itself and not to the overhead of the fund. But I think it's a chance for federal employees to give back. And I think it's about caring for our communities and each other. And so much good comes out of the CFC campaign. And so I'm proud to work with the commissioner as well to, you know, highlight that for federal employees and really encourage people to give it a look and consider donating through those ways.
Duncan, any final comment or question for Doreen?
I do have a final comment, and it dovetails into what Doreen originally was talking about in the time for voting. I can't stress enough how important it is. I've voted in every election that I've been able to since 1980, when I first turned voting age. And I would urge everyone to look at the candidates up and down the ballot, and especially the ones that, you know, what they say about the federal workforce. You know, take a look at that. Voting for, you know, you want to vote for what things interest you and your self-interest and for you and your family. And I would urge folks to take a close look at that before they go into the booth.
And Doreen, your chance just to make any final comment, something Duncan or I did not get the chance to ask.
I think we covered a lot of issues. I agree with Duncan. Please make a plan to vote. I thank you, gentlemen, both for your time and energy putting this podcast together. I think it's very informative. It's always my honor and pleasure to join you. Happy to address any issues going forward. And just want to end with saying how proud I am to represent NTEU members across the country in the now 36 federal agencies that we represent. And I want people to know how much we appreciate their support, and that being a member of NTEU allows us to do the many great things we do on behalf of federal employees. You have a say in your workplace because you have a union, and I thank you for all of your support and contributions to that goal to better the workplace for your fellow colleagues. So thank you.
And thank you so much, Doreen. She is our special guest on this edition of the Chapter 49 podcast. Of course, we try to keep it weekly. We don't make every week, but we, as much as we possibly can, make this a weekly podcast. So we thank you for taking time out of your busy day to watch or listen to this podcast. In the meantime, please be safe and be kind.